Now, consumers who receive their electricity directly from Eskom will have to pay more money for unreliable service. The energy provider was granted permission to increase tariffs by more than 15% by the North Gauteng High Court in February. In the past, we have seen some residents in Soweto taking to the streets saying they refuse to pay for their electricity bill. How will news of the tariff increase affect such communities? To speak to us more about this, we're now joined by social activist and academic Trevor Ngwane. Very good morning to you. Thank you so much for your time. This is, of course, something that comes at a very unprecedented time in the country, and looking at the economy and looking at the manner in which people are living, unable to afford food and petrol also increasing, a double blow in the energy sector because it's petrol and also electricity. What do you imagine to be the ripple effect?
Yeah, thank you very much, and thanks to your listeners and viewers. This is really going to precipitate a downward spiral, not only for the economy, but for the lives and living conditions of ordinary people in South Africa. I mean, as you yourself point out, throughout the world, there are economic and social problems associated with COVID-19, job losses, more poverty. So this might be, the proverbial, straw which breaks the camel's back.
Now, Trevor, Matulini here. Regarding, all of these increases, as consumers, we're pretty much just sitting ducks. Nothing we can do about it, or is there?
The reason why Eskom and, in a way, the government have been busy scapegoating and, attacking Sowetans. Remember the Soweto bill, remember the whole narrative about a culture of entitlement and unwillingness to pay. It's because Soweto and some other working class areas, they are fighting back. So we are only sitting ducks if we don't unite and fight and demand what is right. So, discussing this in, platforms like this one is part of the process of fighting back and putting pressure on the government and Eskom to do the right thing with us, with the poor, and also with ordinary people.
We know that this tariff hike is going into effect, and we also know that next week the petrol price will go up, and the petrol price will then affect the price of food. What then? Where does it leave the dynamics of citizens in this country and perhaps the alternatives?
Well, basically, the ANC as National Liberation Movement lost the plot when they moved away from pro-socialist policies, social democratic policies towards capitalist, neoliberal, profit-driven, approaches to the economy and to the organization of society. For example, Eskom itself, is in this crisis because of this fostering of the profit model. They wanted to privatize Eskom so that private investors would take over. That is the reason why they didn't build new capacity, new power stations. Corruption has crept into Eskom and is destroying it because of directors who are, profit-driven, who want to enrich themselves. And lastly, this profit model, this hunger for profit rather than, prioritizing the needs of the people has led to a delay in moving away from dangerous and dirty energy from coal towards renewable sources like solar energy, sun power. So I think we need a change in strategy, a change in mindset where we view energy provision as an essential service to serve society rather than as a cash cow to make money for some people.
I mean, you mentioned the cash cow. It's 21% is what the increase is going to be. I mean, that's almost a third of what consumers are currently paying at the moment. It really is unfair on the South African, the average South African in particular, who is going through a very tough time under these current economic circumstances.
Well, stealing and looting, a state entity like Eskom is not just unfair to South Africans, it's a crime against them. So, and also remember, there is also a lot of talk and attempts to impose a levy whereby it doesn't matter how much electricity you pay, you must pay a standard 200 rand or 100 rand every month. So this is really going to push down our living standards, and advocate that we should all stand up, speak with one voice, and have what Americans call a pushback against this attempt, to bury us alive.
Do you think or anticipate that we could see this sort of pushback from Sowetans as we saw in the recent past? I mean, does it make sense at all to increase electricity and have constant load shedding and unreliable supply of electricity?
Well, when it comes to Sowetans, when it comes to people in Soshanguve or Kukuletu, Langa, and also the black rural areas, we have what I'm calling energy racism, whereby, black working class areas, villages, shack settlements are targeted for additional load shedding called load reduction. So if you live in town in Sentin, you'll get maybe 2 hours load shedding a week or maybe slightly more. But if you live in Soweto, you'll get maybe 24 hours in a week load shedding. So it's entirely unfair to be paying, for an unreliable, constantly off power system. It's simply unfair. It's suffering. It's terrible.
Now, Trevor, how do we fix this? What is the silver bullet, if there was one, to fix all of these problems and make them go away?
Well, remember that electricity is not the only sphere where the ANC government is messing up and making life miserable for us. You go to hospitals, you go to roads, everything they touch turns into dust. And I think the reason is because they prioritize profits over the needs of the people. They've got a slogan, the government, Batu Pili, but for them it's profit first. So that is the silver bullet, and it's the big silver bullet, and it's the elephant in the room. We have to reorientate and start to approach society, to approach life by prioritizing the needs of ordinary people, by actually making sure that the rich don't get richer and the poor poorer, by delivering on the promise of national liberation. And also, I'd like to point out by moving away from what I can call racial capitalism. So the type of economic system we have in South Africa is racial capitalism, and it continues despite the end of apartheid. This is the silver bullet. It's a big bullet, I know. Maybe it's a bomb, but we need it. Otherwise, on all spheres, we are failing.
As you speak about racial capitalism, we know that Stats SA unveiled some numbers here saying that municipalities had expanded their service delivery, but were now providing fewer services for free. We know that in the past there were perhaps areas which, for instance, received free water, and those services are no longer available.
Yeah, this is terrible. Like I say, the promise of national liberation. Remember the RDP, the Reconstruction and Development Program. The youth don't even know that. They know RDP houses. That was the dream. That was the period of honeymoon when the needs of people were prioritized. As soon as we move to GEAR, which is the Growth, Employment and Redistribution Program, which is a pro-capitalist, pro-rich, pro-big business economic policy, things started to fall apart. We're deteriorating, the rich are getting richer, and one by one, every aspect of an ordinary South African, when I say South African, I mean also people, from Malawi, our friends and neighbors who live here. Every South African is suffering and is not getting better, it's getting worse. And remember, it starts by hitting the poorest of the poor. It goes up to the working poor, the working class, and then it also starts chipping away at the lower middle class. Eventually, everyone will bear it except Oppenheimer, Motsepe, and the big guys on top, who always, of course, have got their island in Bahamas to run away to when everything collapses.
As you speak about the poorest of the poor, and perhaps give us more depth on exactly how this affects them, and what sort of ripple effect, and what else does it open the poorest of the poor in this country to, because of the systems that are beyond them?
Yes, so, remember that during the HIV crisis, life expectancy dropped drastically. People could live up to 62 years. Now they could only live to 51 years. And then after the struggle of the treatment action campaign, for HIV medication, life expectancy increased again. I think now we are reaching a threshold where that is going down. It means more people are dying. The worst part, the heartbreaking part, is the recent report on, child development, where it was found that up to 40%, children, babies in South Africa have what is called stunted growth. This means that their brains, their bodies, their limbs are not growing as they should be. So we're going to have short people with little brains, who won't be able to be effective members of society. So these are some of the consequences of prioritizing profit over people, of not focusing on meeting ordinary people's needs, rather than making Oppenheimer, Solkesna, Motsepe, and all, the rich capitalists richer.
A very moved social activist and academic, Trevor Ngwane, thank you so much for your time this morning. We really do appreciate it on the Newsfeed AM. It's just getting harder and harder to survive and just to live in the world, really.
It also just talks about how one needs to readjust their lives. I mean, we spoke about the new normal when COVID-19 kicked in, but now with the price of petrol going to increase, Buhle, it makes you question whether you're driving the right vehicle, or you're living in the right place, So it's adjustments that we're all being forced into a corner into making. I mean, we saw what COVID-19 did for people who'd lost their jobs. Some became entrepreneurs and became quite successful. So there is a glimmer of hope.
Yeah.
Depending on how you choose to see it.
Look, the new normal is turning out to be a very, very difficult normal for a lot of people in South